Amanda. I'm so excited to talk about pre-launching with you today. But before we get started, will you share who you are and what you do in the world with everyone?
Of course. Well, I'm so honored to be here. I'm really excited to get to be part of this beginning phase of your podcast because I'm personally really excited to go in and listen to all of your episodes for improving my own courses. So it's quite an honor to be here. But for everyone that hasn't met me yet, I'm Amanda Warfield. I'm a simplicity focused content marketing strategist, and I help other entrepreneurs, especially solopreneurs and entrepreneurs with really small teams, get their marketing out into the world without spending a million hours on their marketing and letting their marketing take over their business.
And you also have an amazing podcast, by the way, which I have listened to so many episodes of since I discovered it and we became friends, which for everyone listening, Amanda and I feel like we really became friends over talking about launching and like launch stresses. And honestly, there were a few vent sessions about some experiences we've gone through where the pre-launch phase, which is what we are diving into today, did not go well or was non-existent. So today I'm going to pick your brain about pre-launching, content marketing, all of which you are a genius at, and you do it for clients and you teach other people how to do it, which is amazing.
Yes, well, thank you. It's such an important part of any launch that you put out there. And it's actually really funny because I had a client send me a Voxer today and she said, there's this offer that we have been talking about and planning it for launching for months now. And she said, well, so I did this thing and I thought I was Beyonce and I could just, drop an album and everyone would care. And so I just put the offer out there and expected to get a lot of sales. And I'm not Beyonce. And I just was like, I'm going to talk about this in all of my copy from now on because that is exactly, we're not Beyonce. We can't just say, here's a brand new offer and we haven't done any kind of lead up into it and just expect it to hit number one on the charts.
But that's what it feels like you should do. And it's not because I think we're full of ourselves or we think we're Beyonce. It's because we don't realize how much like prep people need and they need an introduction. And it feels so abrupt if you're just like, hey, the cart is open. Do you want to buy it? That feels great if you're Beyonce, but does not feel great if you're running your own business.
Well, that's what we see when we look at other people's launches, because what we tend to do as entrepreneurs, we're all really scrappy. And so we see this person's doing this. How can I reverse engineer what I'm seeing to do it for myself as well? And so we see their launch, but really what we're seeing is just that very tip of the iceberg, and the rest of that iceberg or that pre-launch period is all under the water. And so they've been doing all of this work and they've got this massive iceberg under the water that we just haven't seen. And we think the tip of the iceberg is what is actually making those sales for them. And that's really not. That's just the cherry on top.
And behind the scenes, there's so much that goes into launching that is not visible, like the planning. And often as a consumer, you miss some of the pre-launch items. And so you don't always realize like the buildup that is happening. Will you start by kind of giving everyone an overview of what a pre-launch runway is and pre-launch content in general? And we're going to dive into exactly what you should have in that, but we should probably start by explaining what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the pre-launch runway is essentially just the lead up that you are taking, the journey you're taking your audience on as you lead into a launch. So it's that part of the iceberg that's under the water that no one's really seen, or they're seeing it, but they're not putting together that it's part of the launch, like you said, because you're not selling during the pre-launch. And I know we'll get into all of that in a minute of what exactly is happening, but a pre-launch period is just taking your audience from problem unaware all the way to solution aware, and then with the launch, offer aware to student.
And as we shared at the beginning of this episode, this is the phase that a lot of people skip. Like a lot of people don't talk about the thing they're going to launch before the actual launch. So I just kind of wanted to share some things we both have seen from skipping this phase, because I think we've both been on the side of people either completely skipped it or made it really, really short and left their customers feeling confused.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of times I've had a client come to me and say, "Hey, I want to launch this thing in 2 weeks." And I'm like, "Nope, it's not happening. I'm not helping you make a plan for that." Like, we can't launch something in 2 weeks because you have to breadcrumb your audience through this entire customer journey, essentially. And you can't just say, "Hey, here's this offer." There are some very, very, very few instances where that can work. But 9 times out of 10, you have to really lead your people from here's where I think my problem is to, oh, here's my actual problem to, oh, here's how I solve that to, oh, here is something that you offer that can help me solve that. And without that pre-launch phase, your people are way back here in the problem unaware where they're not connecting the dots between what they think their problem is to how you can solve the problem.
And you mentioned breadcrumbs, which is always how I describe it as well, because when we're talking about creating pre launch content, it usually involves some teasing of like, hey, I'm going to launch this thing. But it is a lot more than that because, as you shared, you have to share the problem they're experiencing to begin with, which sounds so weird that people don't always know their own problems. But it's true. People kind of know they're experiencing a problem, but they don't always know how to define it or that there's a solution. Will you speak a little bit more about that breadcrumbing and how you start to introduce the problem that your offer is about to solve?
I will, but I want to touch on something that you just said, actually. You mentioned the teasing of, oh, I've got this thing coming. And something that I see so often that I really wish people would stop doing when they're launching is teasing without giving any information in their tease. And I know you see this too because we've talked about it, but
Yes.
so often we think that teasing a new offer means sharing a story on Instagram and saying, "Oh, I'm working on this thing behind the scenes and I can't wait to tell you about it. It's a surprise." Nobody cares. You haven't given them a reason to care about what that surprise offer is because you haven't connected it to them in any way. And so when all you do is say, "I'm working on something, I'm working on something, I'm working on something," and then you drop the offer, you go, "Oh, but I teased it," but you didn't. You didn't tease it. They had no reason to connect to it. So instead, what you want to do as you're breadcrumbing through this pre-launch period is you want to go back to that question of what is the problem that my offer is solving? And then what is the problem before the problem? What is the problem that my people think that they have? So if we were to use you, for example, and the problem that you solve when you're auditing courses is you are helping your people create a course that their students actually finish so that their business can then, continue to grow and expand by word of mouth from students and all of those fun things. And it's so important, but most of the time, your audience isn't going to have a clue that that's their problem. They probably think it's marketing that's an issue. And so their problem before their problem is my course isn't selling well. Well, it's not selling well because your students aren't finishing it, but you're not connecting the dots to those, right? And so you have to go back to what problem do they think they have and how can I help them realize the problem they actually have? And you use your content to kind of change their mindset about what it is that they need to improve on.
Well, and it's so true as entrepreneurs because I do this in my own business. I misdiagnose the problem I think I have. And I think if I'm not selling something or something, it's a Facebook ads problem or it's a marketing problem, like you said. And so often it's something else. So I love that of you have to help them uncover the problem before the problem. I'm also so glad you mentioned the teasing thing because I sometimes will be working on a course launch for a client and we're talking about pre-launch plans and their plan is to just say over and over again, this is coming soon and basically have a countdown. And sometimes people think that's enough. And it's fun sometimes to share like a behind the scenes photo. I'm into that stuff, but it is not enough and to just continuously be saying coming soon, coming soon. It almost gets annoying, which is that's not the pre-launch content we're talking about.
Well, and I think what you said there, it's not enough, is the key point. Those are great. I'm with you. I like seeing the behind the scenes when people are working. I'm nosy. But it's got to be coupled with this education of why what you're working on and the course you're going to be launching is so important and is going to be so helpful so that they get excited when they see that you're working on it versus just being like, cool, she's working on a course or something. I don't know.
Will you start diving into all of the different phases of the pre-launch runway? And I was so excited when you were like, we should break this down on the podcast because this is like a course in itself that people sell. And I was like, oh, you're willing to just like share in detail, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wish I had like cool names for these, but I don't. So we'll work backwards because tip of the iceberg down, I guess. You've got your launch week, which is when doors are open, carts open, whatever phrase you want to use. Doors are open and you are hard selling. The week before that is a great time to do what I call a visibility booster. So you are doing something like a private podcast or a Facebook challenge or a webinar. You're doing something that week to really build your visibility and get your engagement up throughout your entire business, through your emails, through your social media, through all of the things. And so you're using that week before as that visibility booster to really get visible and get people's eyes on you and how great you are. Then for the 4 to 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on whether you've launched this course before or it's brand new, you are in what I call pre-launch, where you are talking about the fact that the course is coming, but you're really moving people from problem aware to solution aware. And that's where they're finally like, oh, I need my course audited, or I need to make sure I'm getting my students to actually take the course after they've purchased. There's another step there. They realize that that's the problem they're having. Okay, how do I do that? And so then you're going through and teaching all of your greatness about how to improve your course, and you're making them solution aware as to how to actually solve that problem so that when you say, hey, I'll do it for you, they're like, oh yes, please take my money, right? So the pre-launch period, you are taking them from problem aware to solution aware. You're being super informative, super educational, and you're talking about the fact that, hey, I'm sharing all this great stuff with you. Save the date for when my course is launching. And you are saying, you're not selling, but you're saying this course is coming and I have an offer for this. Be aware. And then before that, for about 4 to 6 weeks, you have the pre-launch period. Again, I wish I had cooler names, but I don't. The pre-launch period. And at that point, you're maybe pointing people towards a wait list if you mention the course, but you're not really doing that at all. What you're really doing is you're working on that mindset piece that we talked about, and you're taking your people from problem unaware to problem aware. And you mentioned earlier that you really often misdiagnose what that problem is. And this is a great time to experiment with what that might be. Maybe one week you put out content that's all around, oh, my marketing's not working. Maybe the next week you're putting out content that's all around, off the top of my head, I'm really bad at this, a different problem that your people might have, and you can kind of experiment with that over the next few weeks of, is this something you're struggling with? Here's a solution. Is this something you're struggling with? Hey, same solution, and you're kind of bringing them into this place of, oh, I need to make sure that my course is tight and that it's actually going to be gotten through because I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours creating it. We want to make sure that the people are actually going through it. And when they love it and get that transformation, oh, they're going to share about it. And then everything's, rainbows and butterflies and all of those things.
Yeah, you really are looking at this full customer journey, which most people, when they think of launching, they just think of the customer journey from the sales page, is where most people tend to start. And it starts.
That's the end.
Yeah. And it starts so much sooner. And then it goes so much longer than you think, too, of after they click buy. And then they've got to go through your course or your product and you have to support them. But it's really like this huge process. And you probably have been in someone else's pre-launch at some point and not even realized it. Like,
absolutely.
Well, I work in the launch world all the time, and I still sometimes I'm like, oh, they're starting a pre-launch, I think. Like, it's all because you're starting to educate them basically, and it's really subtle at first, but it's like this longer form education, however you want to do that, blog posts, podcasts. I think it varies for everyone, and really setting yourself up as the expert who's about to solve their problems.
Exactly. And like you said, it is so subtle, which is why, going back to the very beginning, you only see that endpoint and think that's the launch. But like you said, the sales page, that's the end. And your entire pre launch period is just marketing. So, marketing and sales are two different things, right? Marketing is like the trek that you take up the mountain. You're bringing your people towards a sale, and the sale is that precipice on top, right? Marketing and sales are not the same thing. Marketing is all of the different things that you're doing to get people to that sales page. When they get to the sales page, it's going to convert so much better if you've done that marketing. If you just drop someone on top of a mountain, they're going to be like, I don't know, what do I do from here, right? They haven't taken that journey. And then on the other side of that, you've got the entire customer journey that you help your people with, which is the journey doesn't stop at the precipice as soon as they become a student. Like, you've got all this other work to do too. And so I think so often we look at that mountaintop and we go, that's what I want. And we don't realize that there's this whole trek up one side and then back down the other to actually complete this entire journey for our people.
And it really is like dropping someone off of a mountaintop, because I'm thinking of when people send out an email for open cart and they say, here's the link. And that's like you just drop them on the mountaintop to this sales page. They might not even know that you do this thing in your business, depending on what type of product this is, if you've launched it before. And you just give them the link and expect them to figure it out. It's kind of wild, because I don't think that really works for anyone, to just be dropped off on a sales page and be like, figure it out if it's for you.
Unless you're Beyonce.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, let's be real. None of us want to part with our money, right? We like to make really intentional, strategic decisions for our businesses. And you have to help someone make up their mind before they even get to the sales page. And you do that through your marketing. And I'm not saying that you're convincing them to buy. I'm saying you're helping them make up their mind whether or not this is right for them. And so you have to give them all of the information and the tools to know that before you even take them to that mountaintop.
And traditionally in the launching world, there's 2 days where there's a spike in sales, and there might be some variance if you throw a bonus in there. But the biggest days are obviously cart close. Everyone waits until the last minute and then they buy. But the other day that I always see is usually the highest second day for clients is cart open. And that's because a lot of people, they made the decision to buy before they could even do it. They just spent, the last month realizing they needed their problem solved. And so that's why when you send out the first email, you get purchases or crickets, depending on how you planned out your pre-launch phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I do a waitlist strategy, which I feel like we could do a whole different episode about, honestly, but I always open the doors to my waitlist early, and they know ahead of time, like, hey, I've got doors opening. They basically get the sales emails, a shortened version, ahead of time because they've already said, hey, I'm interested in this offer. And they know, okay, doors open. I've got 24 hours to use this special discount or get this special bonus, whatever the incentive is. And I have to enroll in that first day. And then if you set it up that way, you're able to create that momentum on day one so that before doors even technically open to the rest of the world, you've got sales, you've got social proof, you've got people so excited and sharing about it on their stories and all of this stuff. And it really is just through that intentional building up of, hey, this is coming. But if you just open the doors and say, hey, doors are open, you wouldn't have done any of that momentum building, which means your launch doesn't have momentum to start off with.
I'm going to pick your brain a little bit about wait lists, because I'm so glad you mentioned it. And Amanda's right. This would be like an entire other masterclass episode on waitlist strategy. But I do want to talk about it a little bit, because I think most people think waitlist and then I'll call it your general list are the same thing. People treat it the same. And they should be different. Some people do have a wait list technically, and then they send the same exact emails to everyone. I see that a lot, where I'm kind of like, well, why did you have a wait list if you're going to send the same email? So will you talk through some things that are really effective around wait lists? You shared a lot already, but why it can be a real, like, wait list people can be your biggest asset during a launch, honestly.
They are your hottest leads, and they should be treated like it. So to back up one step, let's talk about launch lists versus email lists versus wait lists. So your full email list is everyone who signed up at any point for your email list, right? For whatever freebie, whatever offer, they're on your email list for some reason. With every offer that you have, you should have a launch list. And that launch list typically consists of people who have downloaded a freebie that will lead directly to your course, or it's around the same topic, right? Even if within the freebie you don't even mention the course, it's the same topic. So you've got your freebie list. You also have the people that sign up for whatever that visibility booster is, because that's also going to lead directly into that offer. It is going to prepare your people to take that step, and essentially it's bringing people in a quick way from problem unaware to problem aware, so that they're able to go, oh, okay, so you can solve this for me. I didn't even know this was my problem, right? You've got those two. And then you've also got your wait list. And those are the three segments of a launch list. The people that have signed up for your freebie are people that have said, yes, I'm interested in this topic. I want to learn more. I potentially want something. They're technically a warm lead because they're on your email list, but of the launch list, they're the coolest leads. Those are the people that you're bringing in year round. You're just talking about that freebie all the time between launches, and you're pulling them in that way. Then you've got your warm leads from your visibility booster, and they're warmer because they've been really having their hand held over this last week, and they are actively listening to what you're saying in that moment during that launch. And then you've got your wait list, which is your hottest leads, and they should be treated that way. And the best thing you can do is treat your wait list as a priority instead of something that falls to the bottom of your to-do list, which I think is what tends to happen. You go, oh, I know I'm supposed to have a wait list, and I have it, but I'll just send them the regular launch emails. But when you treat them as a priority, there's this connection piece with them, right? Because when someone says, I want to be on the wait list for this course, they are saying, I am actively interested not only in this topic, not only in this transformation, but in this specific course, right? They have said, I want your course, or I'm very interested in your course. And people aren't going to sign up for a wait list if they're not at least seriously considering your course, right? So when they put their hand up and they say, yes, I want to be part of your wait list, treat them with the respect that deserves, right? Hold their hand in a way that deserves. And so I always offer my wait list some kind of bonus or some kind of discount, and they always get to purchase a day early before anyone else. They're the first ones to get access. They're the first ones to be able to get inside of the course, and they're able to get something special just for being on the wait list. And so as you're in your pre-launch period and you say, hey, if you're interested, this course is coming, join the waitlist and you're going to get XYZ, whatever it is that your incentive is. And that encourages them to join. And then as you're leading up to doors open, you're able to say, hey, remember, you're going to get this bonus, but only for 24 hours. And it really makes them think ahead of time whether or not they want to buy it. And so treating your waitlist as VIPs on your email list is going to be so important. And if they don't buy, then yes, send them the rest of the launch emails, but they don't have to just get the same old that everyone else does. And you really shouldn't be, unless this is your first ever offer and you don't have any other offers, you shouldn't be sending all of your launch emails to your entire email list. You can send one or two, but there's no reason to send 10 emails to someone who hasn't even downloaded the freebie and said, I'm interested in the topic. Did I answer your question, or did I go on a tangent?
Yes, well, and you gave me some other things I really want to talk about, because so when I mention anything pre-launch to people, usually their biggest fear around a pre-launch strategy, which as Amanda shared, and I want to dive into timelines a little more later, because you shared some timelines that probably blew some people's minds, that like you do 6 weeks of this and then there's 6 weeks of this, and before that you're planning it. But people always, when we're talking about pre-launching, they're worried they're going to annoy their email list, which is what you just talked about. And so I kind of want to talk through that again of There are ways to treat your email list with respect. And yes, during every launch, you're going to get some unsubscribes. That's normal. That's actually probably a good thing. I've never met someone who didn't get some unsubscribes. But there are ways you can treat people with respect and segment them so you're not sending everything to everyone. And people notice when emails are more personalized, when you're specifically saying, hey, you're on the wait list, you're getting access to this. Like, people recognize and start to notice that, and it builds integrity in your brand.
Well, and I think the important thing to note is that when we're talking about pre-launch, again, we're not selling during the pre-launch. And so you're not annoying your people because the content that they're getting, that we're like all of this breadcrumbing that you're doing, it's just what you're talking about in your typical weekly or bi-weekly content, right? It's not like you're going out of your way to create extra content for those 12 weeks, which yes, I realize now that I dropped that as if that was nothing, and that's probably a big shock to people. So we can touch on that in a minute, but you're just putting out your typical amount of content. So you're not annoying people by putting all this extra stuff out there, and you're not selling for 12 weeks. So that's not annoying people either. You're just serving your people really, really well by making sure that you're being intentional and strategic with the content that you're putting out there. But when it comes to the actual launch week, yes, I just set up a whole Google Doc for one of my clients of here are all the emails you need for your launch week. And it's like 30 emails, but a lot of them can be reused in the vast majority. They just have to be tweaked, like you said, for different segments. And so that's another reason having people segmented on your email list into they came in on this freebie, or they joined for this visibility booster, or they're interested in the waitlist. Having all of these different segments, I know it can feel kind of messy on the back end, but it's so important for being really intentional with that marketing content that you're putting out, and then that sales content that you're putting out during the launch.
And it's so powerful too. And you talked about launch Google Docs and that there was 30 emails in there, which yes, is super normal. I'm currently working on a client launch and I think we're up to 75 pages in our Google Doc, but just so people aren't intimidated, you're sending these different segments, but a lot of the emails are super similar. Like literally you're probably copying and pasting an email and then adapting it. So don't be overwhelmed.
You're probably not writing more than like 10, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like a lot.
It does sound like a lot to people before they're in this world. It's really not that bad, though, in having a detailed launch document that has, like, this is what waitlist people are getting. This is what the general list is getting. This is what people who signed up for this specific freebie, we're going to send them a one-off email. Like, I think it's a fun puzzle, but I know it can be overwhelming to other people.
Which is why there are people like you and I in the world that can help create those for people and just say, this is what you need.
Let's go back to timelines, because yes, 12-week launch period basically intimidates a lot of people. So after you pick your launch week, the date that you want to launch, when do you think people should start be working on their launch content? Like starting to prepare. You're not publishing it yet, because I think both you and I have had a lot of conversations with people that come up to us and say, hey, Mara and Amanda, I would love to launch my course in a week. And we just go, no, that's not how
I can't help you with that. Yeah. So I would say to start preparing your launch content, and we're not even talking about like the course or anything like that, like just specifically preparing the content at least 16 weeks out, if not more. And I know that that sounds bananas, but when you're launching a course for the first time, you really want a full 12-week launch runway. And so you've got, 4 to 6 weeks where you're doing pre-launch, probably about 4. And then you've got about 5 weeks where you're doing the pre-launch. And then you've got a week for visibility boosting and a week for the launch. And so that's 12 weeks of content that you've got to map out and create right there and put all of those puzzle pieces together as far as, okay, because a lot of times we don't, when clients come to me, they don't even have the freebie in place that they need. They have no part of the launch system together. So we've got to say, okay, well, here's the freebie. And when do you want to start breadcrumbing that? Well, we've got to work backwards so you have enough time to actually create the freebie, right? And so honestly, if you can start 20 weeks out, and I'm not saying that as an excuse to not, for all my perfectionist listeners out there, I'm not saying 20 weeks and, you know, that's going to be, can't launch my course for 20 weeks. So let me put it off. Like, let's not look at it that way. But you do want to make sure you're giving yourself enough time to move through all of the different pieces of a launch, because there are a lot of moving pieces and the content is only one part of it. You've got to have the entire strategy in place before you can even lay out the content strategy and then start creating the content from that strategy from there.
And giving yourself time at the beginning, which I recommend just as long, if not more sometimes. I usually tell people, like, start to finish, give yourself at least 6 months if you're creating the course, and you need to create all of the launch assets, which sounds like a long period of time, but all of us in our business are also doing other things. We have clients, we have another course we're supporting. So when you're realistic about that stuff, you can avoid what I call chaos launching, which is something that definitely happens, where you decide you're launching and you just make up the content each week. Do not do that. It's incredibly stressful, and there's always going to be elements of your launch that at the last minute you decide to maybe change out an email or something changes. Give yourself the grace that those things are going to happen, but don't do it to yourself where you have nothing planned, because as you said, you really have to start breadcrumbing it, and this stuff takes a while to set up. Like setting up the freebie, you've got to write the freebie, you've got to create the email opt-in, you've got to create your tagging system, you've got to create like the thank you email for downloading the freebie, and then from there you've got to figure out the rest of the path. So it can be a longer journey, and I think the best thing people can do is start early and like pick a date that's far in the future so you can work backwards, just like you did at the beginning of this episode, of choose your open cart date, check to make sure there's no like crazy major holidays on it or anything like that, and then start to work backwards.
Well, and something you said triggered this thought for me. The goal with any launch should really be that you are done with all of the launch prep before the cart even opens. Honestly, depending on what your visibility booster is, before the visibility booster even begins, because you're going to be in sales mode, which again is different from marketing, and it's really draining, especially when you're showing up in a lot of different ways to sell. You're going to be in sales mode for those 1 to 2 weeks, and you want to be able to give all of your energy just to that, because the more you show up and are visible during those 2 weeks, the more sales you're going to make. It just is what it is. So if you can work backwards and give yourself a long enough runway to work on all of the pieces, well, you're going to be able to actually show up during that launch week for yourself and for just for selling. And the launches that I've done that I've protected in that way go so much better, because I'm able to wake up, take the morning really slow, look at, okay, what do I need to show up on stories for? Like, what are the live things that are happening today? Am I going live on Instagram? Am I showing up on stories? Am I doing a Facebook Live? Showing up for those things and showing up for them really well. And then after those are done, retreating and going for a walk, or, taking time to care for myself because it is draining. And then, okay, is there anything else that has to happen today where I'm live? And that's all you have to do during your launch week if you've set up those boundaries and given yourself a long enough runway, and you get to just take care of yourself and do the sales and then enjoy watching the sales actually come in.
Sometimes I talk to people about my business and how I'm constantly, Amanda knows this, I'm constantly launching something for a client like all the time. And people will be like, how do you do that? Because launching gets a bad rap, honestly. There are so many like horror stories out there around launching is so stressful, you're going to just be so burnt out and overwhelmed. And exactly what you shared, that happens when you don't give yourself the space to have all of the content done, because you really do have to show up as an educator during launch week. And it's kind of like, well, we both were teachers in the past, but like open house when you're a teacher and the parents come and like see your classroom and you have to be on point and you have to answer all these questions. And it's like the most draining night of your entire life. But that's what you have to be during open cart of like showing people, hey, I am a helpful person who will be there answering your questions, showing you things, guiding things. And one big launch sabotage I see all the time is people get really burnt out and overwhelmed by their launch. And then they like hide the week of the launch. And they're like, I can't show up on anything. They get behind on responding to emails because if you're having a launch that you probably are going to start to get a lot of inquiries, questions about things. People just like want to see you, but there's definitely a way to manage it where it doesn't have to turn into these like horrific, burnt out, overwhelmed stories that we all seem to have in online business.
Yeah, and it really does come down to protecting that time. Don't plan to have a huge client project due that same week, protect that time so that your launch is your sole focus and so that you can show up and then retreat and take care of yourself to prevent that burnout so you can continue showing up throughout the entire week. Because you're right, way too often people will start off really strong the first 2 days of their launch and then Wednesday they just go quiet. And you're like, no, this is when you're building the momentum for the end of the launch. Like, you've got to keep showing up even when, like you mentioned, those sales tend to dip during the middle of the week. That's normal. That's natural. You're not doing anything wrong, but keep showing up so that you do get that boost again at the end.
And a lot of my clients will be like, Mara, you're basically a therapist during launch week as well. Because as you mentioned, first of all, you do have to build in like time where you go for a walk and your phone does not go, or you take like a bubble bath. Because launching is just draining and stressful unless you're some crazy extrovert who just doesn't mind being on all the time. And then also there's a lot that comes up just around responding to people. There's a lot of stuff sometimes behind the scenes. I've never personally had a launch where something technologically didn't go wrong. Sometimes it's something super small, but I always tell people, like, no matter what we do, there's probably going to be a link that doesn't work at some point, or someone on your team's accidentally going to share the wrong thing, or, and it's okay. It's all part of the fun. But you do have to build in a little self-care too, because it's a mindset game of watching the sales come in or not come in, and it brings up a lot of stuff, and you never know. Sometimes a bunch of sales come in right away. I've been a part of launches where we thought it tanked and no one bought, and then the last day was like blew numbers out of the water, and we had like the most profitable month ever in the business. So it really can vary.
And the mindset stuff is one of those things that it's a lot tougher than it seems like it would be. And it brings up, especially when you're so dialed into exactly how many sales are coming through, how many different clicks are happening in the emails, what's the percentage, like it brings up a lot of stuff mentally. And even like, I wouldn't say I'm a woo person, but it's just like, oh, I have a lot I need to work through because this is bringing up a lot of feelings that I had no idea that I had.
It really makes you confront so many things in your mindset and your life, because it just can bring up a lot. Well, I want to make sure I ask you this because this is like your zone of genius, but I want to talk about, how do you decide exactly what to create content on for the pre-launch phase? Like you mentioned, okay, we kind of know the person's problem, but from there, what do you do? Like a blog post, a podcast? How do you know what to talk about?
As far as where you're showing up, for the vast majority of the pre-launch content, you're just doing your typical content. So if you already have a podcast, that's where you're going to, all the places. But if you already have a podcast, do it on the podcast. If you have a blog, do it on the blog. If you have a YouTube channel, use your YouTube channel for that content. Your email newsletters, your social media, all the stuff you're already doing, your current content plan, that's all you're going to be creating. And then when you get to about 4 weeks, 3 weeks before cart opens, then you're going to ramp up the amount of times you're posting. So maybe if you're posting twice a week to your Instagram feed, you're posting 4 times. And maybe if you're showing up 3 days a week on your Instagram stories, you're showing up 5 days a week. And so you will kind of bump up closer to the launch how often you're showing up. But as far as where you're showing up, you're just showing up on your typical platforms. You're not going outside of the box really with that. And in fact, I wouldn't recommend starting a new platform during a launch, because that in and of itself is a launch, right? You're launching a podcast at the moment. It's a whole thing, even if it's not a course launch, and that's messy. Don't do that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, by the way, because when you start talking about launching and planning a launch, it's really easy to get shiny object syndrome, and it's so easy to be like, okay, well, I already have a podcast, but you know what we should do, guys? We're going to start a YouTube channel before this launch. We're also going to start TikTok before this launch, and we're going to hire all of these people. That is exactly what you don't want to do. So I just want to reiterate, show up where you already show up, and then the off seasons from launching are when you can experiment with all of the like other fun platforms, because you don't know if they work too. I mean, how many of us have gone on a platform and been like, you know what, other people like this, but I hate this. Like, this is not where I want to be, or this is not where my audience is. And so launching, it's not the time to start something new.
Well, and to start showing up on a new platform, you have to fully understand the platform, what works for your specific. We just did this with a client. Actually, they had a big launch coming up and they wanted to be on TikTok. And they're like, all right, so how are we going to sell on TikTok? And I was like, we're not. What we're doing with your TikTok strategy is going to just be educational. We're not going to sell right now because we're building up your audience. You don't have an audience there yet. So yeah, don't start new things. That would be the definition of chaos launching, right? Like that would be bananas to sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to be launching this whole course, which is a massive 6-month undertaking. And we're also going to start this whole new content platform, which is also a massive undertaking. I think a lot of times we look at a new platform and we go, oh, it'll take me just a little bit of time. Like, no, it always takes you way longer than you think to create content. So yeah, where you're showing up now and how often you're showing up now, caveat, if you're not consistent in some way with your content, get consistent, but how often you're showing up now, just continue doing that until about 3 to 4 weeks out from card open.
And what if you don't really have an audience yet? Because sometimes I will launch courses with people and they don't have an email list yet, or their email list is in the lower numbers, or wherever their community is. Sometimes I get pushback of, well, I don't need to do a pre-launch because no one follows me anyway.
Okay, so I've got 2 things for this. One, you don't need as big of a launch or as big of a list as you think you need in order to have a really successful launch. I replaced my teaching income with 300 people on my email list. That's it. So you don't need thousands and thousands and thousands of people on your email list in order to make sales. What you'll need to do in that scenario is make sure that you are being really intentional with the people that are on your email list and do more individual reach outs, which I think is honestly a lost art. I think we've been fed this idea of the passive sales and the passive income, and we want to be able to write those 27 launch emails and send them out and make the sales and let that be that. But my most successful launches for both myself and for my clients have always happened when I go into Kartra, which is what I use for my email list, and I look at who clicked over to the sales page but didn't purchase yet. And then I go find them on Instagram and I just pop in their inbox and say, hey, I noticed that you were looking at insert offer here. I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions at all, I'm here to answer them and help you decide whether or not this is the right fit for you. And I just kind of leave it at that. And 9 times out of 10, what ends up happening is they go, well, here's my question. I'm on the fence because of this. And then they sit there and talk themselves into a circle and go, I'm just going to go buy it. And then they go buy it. But that individual reach out gives them that space, that safe space to talk out what it is that they're feeling. And if it is the right fit for them, they're going to be so much more likely to buy. So those individual reach outs are really, really important if you have a small audience, but also I think for those of us that don't have such a small audience any longer, I think it's a lost art as well. And so I'm always trying to convince my clients, like, who's clicking? Who have you seen click in 2 or 3 of the emails so far but hasn't bought yet? Because they're interested. They keep going back to the sales page. So go talk to them. Reach out to them on a one-to-one basis. And then the other thing I wanted to say to that was, even if you don't have a single person on your email list yet, that is why you build out that 6-month planning period, why you have that 12-week launch runway. Because like I mentioned earlier, you want to have some sort of freebie that is like the prequel to the course. And you want to push people to that freebie. And you want to push people to that freebie so that you can get them on your email list. So throughout the entire pre-launch period, you are building that list. So even if you have no one at the beginning, you have 12 weeks to build that list, and it doesn't have to be a mega list to have a really great sale.
There is so much power in small lists. I actually love small list launches. And as you shared, my own launches and then as well for clients, the smaller ones have been like the most fun, sometimes the most profitable because you can do some really cool things. You can send people Loom videos, you can message them on Instagram, you can send them emails that are like so specific that they're like, "Wait, you literally wrote this?" And you could be like, "Yes, I wrote this just for you." And it that might sound time consuming. You don't have to do it to everyone, as you shared. There are ways to cherry pick people who are clicking on things or who are active, and it like really surprises them and delights them when you kind of break the mold and be a real person, because we've all been through so many launches where we know it's just auto-filling in our name and we're all getting the same thing and we're just a part of the masses. So anything you can do, I agree, it's a lost art form of like individualizing a launch.
Well, and what you said there about like, oh, you don't have to do it for everybody, but because you've planned out for this long runway and you have been really intentional about protecting that launch week time, those are things you can do during the day when you're in launch mode, because you don't have, oh, I still got to write tomorrow's email. I still need to write today's email. I've got to update. Like, you don't have all of those things hanging over your head. It's all done. So you can just focus on the selling side of things.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is, so we hopefully have not overwhelmed people because we've talked about creating 12 weeks of content. We've talked about our crazy Google Docs. And I want to talk about when you launch for the second time or you launch again after creating all of these assets, because it is so much easier and there's a lot you end up reusing, which you probably don't realize as a consumer. But will you walk people through a little bit how they don't need to freak out and be overwhelmed, because every launch truly gets easier, especially if you put the prep work into the first one.
Oh man. Okay. So earlier you mentioned live launching. It's a really bad rap, right? And I think it's because people don't give themselves enough time. They don't properly prep for it, right? But I also think it's because they do one live launch and then they give up on live launching. And truly, the beauty of live launches comes from that repetition and the momentum that you've built from the first one. And so you do all this work and you craft all these great things during the prep time for this launch. You've got your launch week or 2 weeks that you have protected your time and you're focused on selling and taking care of yourself. And you're also, as you're doing it, realizing, oh, I could do this to improve this, or I could do this to improve this. And you might make some of those changes this time if they're quick and easy, or you might just make a little note and say, for the next launch, I want to do this instead. Oh, I have this idea for the next launch. Then you go into, and this is another thing that I wanted to mention a minute ago and totally forgot. So side tangent, but when you are giving those individual personalized invites essentially into your course, you're building community and people are going to be more likely to actually finish your course. When they finish your course and they get that transformation, they're going to share about your course. And so then you go through that whole period, you get these students, this cohort essentially through your course, whether you're doing it live or you've got emails scheduled out ahead of time to walk them through it, right? Whatever method you're using. You get them through it, and then a few weeks later, after they finish, you start your launch runway again, and you reuse the content that you've already created. And yes, your long form content will need to change for a lot of the lead up, right? The runway itself will have the same idea, but different types of topics, right? So when you're talking about, oh, if marketing is your problem, here's how we solve that. You're just going to take a different angle of the marketing problem, right? You're going to take a different type of problem and choose a different angle. And so you're going to switch those out and create new content around that. But then your actual launch content, so the visibility booster that you did, reuse that, maybe tweak it, but reuse it, do the same exact one, because now you'll have all of this data and all of these comments that were left, maybe email replies that you can use as social proof for, look how life-changing this was when I ran this 6 months ago. this is really great. You should come do it again with me. You've got all of those people. You have all of the launch emails, and when you're sending them, and you just have to tweak the dates, right? You've got all of these launch assets that you just tweak and reuse, and it's so much easier to get the second launch up and running. But also, on top of that, reusing all of your content, you also have this list that you have now been building for 12 months instead of just 3, right? You've been building out this because in between launches, you're still pushing that freebie for that course. You're building that list. And then when it comes time to sign up for the visibility booster, you've got all of those people to say, hey, come join us. And you've got all the new people that have joined you in that time period. Hey, come join us. And then so you're able to just really continue to build the momentum from the first launch. And you also have all these students that you can now go to and say, did you love this course? Come join me again for a second round of it live, or I would love it if you would be an affiliate, and you can encourage them to share about it in different ways too. And so you build the momentum in so many different ways in that second, third, fourth launch. But it does take a lot of prep work for the first one. And so I think a lot of times people will go, well, I launched and it took me 6 months and it was not what I wanted. And the second launch is going to be better than the first one. And the third one's going to be better than the second one. And as long as you're continuing to bring in new people, you should still continue to see better and better numbers.
And live launching really does get a bad rap because I've seen that with so many people. They do it one time. And your first launch is going to be, there's going to be a bit of chaos no matter what you do. Like, no matter what you do, there's going to be a bit of chaos.
Well, it's an experiment, right?
Exactly. Launching is an experiment, and it gets so much easier. I have a couple of clients now who I've worked with for years, and I know, okay, we do a launch every July. So in February, I open up our old Google Doc from last year. At the top, there's a bunch of notes of things we like, things we did wrong, things we felt stressed out about. And then, like you said, we go in and we look at the blog posts we created last time or podcast episodes, and we find the different nuances. And it's like fun from there because we're not starting from scratch. And I don't think a lot of people realize that because they don't get to the second or the third launch or even like the 10th launch where you're just constantly refining things. You're figuring out what worked in this big old experiment. And then you also have a bunch of new people who come along every time and like it's their first interaction with you, which is really fun.
Okay, so that's an important point too. I feel like we could just keep talking for hours. But when you are launching, you're getting really visible, right? We mentioned that earlier. You're going to be bringing in and attracting a lot of new audience members during that time. And the important thing to remember is that most of those new people will not convert during your launch. But when you launch the second time, they're going to go, oh, I remember them launching this before. I feel like this is kind of where I found them, and they were doing a lot of things and everyone was really excited, and I maybe I should look into this. You're kind of setting them up for those 7 to 10 touch points that we all need for marketing, right? You're setting them up for the next launch. And so with each launch, not only are you selling, but you're bringing in new audience members because you're more visible, and you're setting them up for the next launch and the next one and the next one.
Exactly. And it gets easier, and it's really this long journey because I've been a part of people's lists where I didn't buy the first or the second time, but by the third time, they're still talking about this and they have more and more testimonials. Like, it starts to get really compelling. And I'm the type of person who tries to like never buy anything, honestly. And that really works for me when I'm like, wow, they're talking about this again. It's grown. They've added a lot more content and lessons. And I mean, I really need to think about this.
Well, and same thing. I've been part of people's, their visibility booster, their challenge, the exact same challenge 3 different times. And on that third one, I was finally like, you know what? I've done this 3 times. I am, I see results, and I see results every time I do this challenge with them. It clearly works. I have the money. Like, sometimes people just aren't in a place where they're ready to spend that kind of money. And that's just normal because frankly, I know that I plan out my investments for the year back in like September the year before. And like, I'm strategic about what I'm investing in and the different areas of my business that I'm improving. But if I go through someone's challenge and I'm like, this is going to make me start thinking that this is something I need to improve on. And then I do it again 6 months later, like, man, this is something I really want to improve on. but I'm just not quite there yet. Maybe by the third time I am. And I've done that too, where it literally took me 3 times of going through someone's exact same challenge to actually make the purchase and decide, okay, yes, I'm ready to put my money here and actually take the time to use this course, because that's, you want people who aren't just going to buy and dip, right? Like, you know, this, you preach this is what you do. You want people that are actually invested, not just monetarily, but mentally and emotionally in that course and that transformation, because frankly, otherwise, what's the point of having them as a student?
Yeah, and you don't necessarily want students who don't have time to go through the course, like truly don't have time. I'm not talking about the excuse we all say where we don't have time, but we all have seasons of life where we really do not need to go through another course, or we have other investments. And it's okay if those people don't buy the first round, because they'll come back in future rounds if you treat them right. I do want to shift gears because I want to talk about your upcoming book, which, for a little behind the scenes, Amanda and I often talk on Voxer, and she's been working on a book, which I am like constantly asking her process for this. Like how she wrote it, what she's doing, because I would love to write a book at some point. And now I have someone that I can send messages to and be like, wait, how did you actually write the manuscript? What it's like working with an editor. So will you tell everyone a little bit about your book that is coming soon, what it's about, and then I'd love to hear a bit about the process and some of the things I've kind of already bothered you about as I've been trying to learn from you and use your experience to someday write a book at some point in the future in my business.
Yeah, man, it's been quite a journey. So the book is called Chasing Simple Marketing for everyone that's listening, and you can learn more about it if you go to amandawarfield.com/book. But the whole premise is it is for the entrepreneur that didn't exactly intend to be an entrepreneur. So those of us that, maybe went to school for something totally different, like education, and thought that that was going to be our path. And then we kind of stumbled into this online business thing. For those of us that are a true creative at heart, the photographers and other creatives. I'm clearly a logical brained person, but the creatives that start this hobby with their gifts and it turns into a business, right? There are so many of us in this online space where we did not intend to be business owners, and all of a sudden we've found ourselves as one, and we realize, oh, I have to figure out how to market myself. What is that? Marketing is such a vague, like people major in marketing alone, right? Like it is such this broad, vague thing. And then also you've got so many different aspects of it, and you've got ever changing algorithms and tactics, and the online business space is just this, it's a wild, wild west for marketing, really. And this book is for that person, that entrepreneur that is like, how in the world do I market myself? And how do I market myself without spending all of my time marketing? Because it's really easy to get caught up in this like feast or famine trap where, okay, I have no clients, so let me spend a ton of time marketing. And then you get the clients and you go, I don't have time to market myself anymore, so let me just work with my clients. And then you realize, oh no, I'm about to offload the last of my clients and I have no one else lined up because I haven't been marketing myself. And so you go through this cycle of marketing, not marketing, marketing, not marketing, because it can be so time consuming. And so this book is basically a how-to guide for marketing your business and fitting your marketing into your business without it taking over your business. And it is based, which Mara has actually gotten to read the initial manuscript, but since you've read it, I've made a lot of changes. And there is an entire section all about what phase of business are you in and what should your content strategy look like based on that phase of business. So if you are a established entrepreneur, if you are a foundation builder, if you are just in the content creator phase, what should you be doing with your marketing? Because there are so many different strategies out there, and it's really hard to disseminate, okay, but is this for me? Do I need to be doing this? Should I be showing up this often? Should I be talking about this? There's a million and one different things out there. So anyways, that was a really long explanation of, it's basically a how-to guide and a marketing handbook for that solopreneur or that small business owner that just never really anticipated having to market themselves.
And like you shared, I read one of your early editions. I know you've been telling me about like the whole editing and revisions process, which Amanda talks about it on her podcast sometimes. I love your like book episodes where you talk about like this is what it looks like to write a manuscript. This is what it looks like to write an editor because it's so or work with an editor, excuse me, because it's so fascinating of seeing that journey from someone who's not like a best-selling author, which hopefully will be someday, but like you decided to write this book. And this book, I remember I think I sent you a message after I had finished it and I was like, why didn't this exist 5 years ago when I was starting my business? Because I remember wanting to start a business and I went to the library and I checked out a bunch of books about marketing and they were all like corporate marketing or they were so high level that I was like, okay, this does not apply to this 25-year-old trying to start her business solo and trying to figure it out. And so I loved that it hit all of these different phases of not just what marketing is, but what it looks like when you're a solopreneur or when you're just starting out. It's definitely more geared towards the creative online business world, which is fantastic because other marketing books are not. They're all about like B2B or corporate marketing, which is a whole different world and
Yeah.
much more boring, I think, than your book, which is full of a lot of actionable advice and strategies and also a lot more fun to read.
Thank you. I That means a lot. The hardest part, and you asked about the process. The hardest part of the process is truly the mindset stuff, which again, I'm not a woo person, but I tend to be pretty confident as a business owner as far as I'm okay with putting myself out there and getting rejected because I know that with every rejection comes the chance for a yes, right? I'm pretty confident about the fact that I can help my clients and that I can give them a great content strategy to implement or that I can write copy for them that's going to convert. I'm really confident as a business owner. This book has wrecked my confidence and my mindset as a business owner. Like, I will go through these phases where I'm feeling really good about it. So to start the process, I did this whole outline and all this brain mapping, and I spent a couple months just like, what am I writing? What do I want it to look like? And it was a mess. And that whole time, it was really hard to motivate myself because I'm like, who am I to write a book? Who am I to write a book? And then I went away. I went to an Airbnb for a week and I wrote the manuscript. And I went home from that and I was like, this is going to be great. I cannot wait. This is so exciting. Blah, blah, blah. And then I went into the editing phase and I sent it off to the editor. Well, I sent it off to beta readers and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to hate it. This isn't going to be helpful. It's going to be terrible. And then, people like you sent me really sweet messages and I was like, oh no, it's good. It's good. It's a good book. It'll be helpful to somebody.
And it was like an entire book, by the way, for the beta read. Like, it was not half of a book or a couple of chapters. It was like a whole book. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Well, I was like, I don't know, is it going to be good? I need all the guidance I can get, right? And then I sent it off to my editor, and as she has it, I'm like, it's going to be terrible. She's going to hate it. Like, she's a professional. Like, the people that read it are just, which is silly, like, because beta readers are so important because those are going to be the people who would read it, right? But I'm like, oh, she does this. Like, this is what she does for a living. She helps everyone with their books. Like this, she's been in the publishing world for years. She's going to tell me it's awful. And then she comes back with her suggestions and does not say that at all, right? And so then I go into the self-editing phase, which was my least favorite thing ever. And we talked a lot during this phase.
Yeah, I was going to say, there were some venting and like encouragement sessions because well, it's kind of like as I'm launching this podcast of like I have to listen to myself at times and edit things. I hate it. And reading your own writing, same thing of like, and that is all you did for weeks. I remember of like intense editing yourself. It was intense.
I did not realize you hear authors all the time talk about how much they hate the editing phase, but I had never heard anyone talk about how time consuming it was. So if you're planning on writing a book, the self-editing phase is really, 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 really time consuming. And I didn't leave myself enough time between the copy editor or the content editor and the copy editor to really give myself enough time to spread it out. And so for 3 weeks, the only thing I did every single day was edit this book. And I had to take all of the suggestions from the beta readers and all the suggestions from the content editor. And I essentially tore the entire book apart and rewrote it. Like, it is actually a completely different book from when you read it now because I ripped every single chapter apart and entire sections got moved around. A whole new section got added. Like there's so much more to it now. And that whole phase was really hard. But then I ended that phase and I rode this high for like 3 weeks, where it's like, this book is gonna help so many people. I cannot wait. Like, marketing is gonna be so much simpler for everybody else. I'm so excited. And now I'm once again at this phase where I've just sent it off for endorsements. And I have some people I'm really excited about getting an endorsement from. And when they responded, were like, oh, I'm going to be reading it this week. I was like, oh no, she's going to hate it. She's going to think it's terrible and she's going to take back her endorsement. And, and you've got all of these fears. And it just is this roller coaster of really high highs and really low lows. So we'll see. We're still a few months out. It launches July 26th. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. We're still a couple months out from launch, and we have moved into the like publication launch phase now. We're out of the editing phase, which is really exciting. But we'll see how that roller coaster continues, but I'm expecting it to probably continue.
And I will put all of the links to Amanda's book, and she has some like book specific blog posts I know, and I'll probably link your podcast obviously because you talk about it on there. And your podcast is also a gold mine for like launching, pre-launch strategy. If you're feeling stuck on this stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, Amanda just told me that I need to do 12 weeks for my launch and I was planning on doing one, that's a great resource to check out. But thank you so much for coming on here and being such an open book and like fully just sharing everything about pre-launch. It's been amazing.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. This has been one of the most fun interviews I've ever done, so thank you.
Yay, that's always my goal. Well, thank you, Amanda.